good evening. Thanks so much for joining us, the Research Triangle PowerShell group. We're super excited to have Jeff Hicks join us tonight. And Jeff, what are we going to be talking about tonight?
Well, tonight I'm going to help you learn PowerShell by solving some puzzles and problems.
So, puzzles, is that kind of like the Iron Scripter thing that you're working on?
Sort of. These are, what I've come up with are a number of, I think of exercises really more than anything. These are questions that someone might come to you and say, hey, I need PowerShell to do X. So these are, we're going to start really, really simple. Okay, so the first couple ones should take you no more than a minute or two to finish. And then they'll get progressively harder. We are not doing really any scripting per se. You're not writing codes or functions or scripts or anything like that. You're just coming up with one or two PowerShell commands that you could type out interactively with the console to answer the question or to solve the problem. And the answer to the problem is not the point. It's how you figured out how to get to that answer. That's where you learn PowerShell and start building up your PowerShell muscles. You have something else, Phil?
No, I was going to say that this is almost like tonight's talk and is a snippet of the other things that you typically do with Iron Scripter, and so there is this other thing external to the meeting, and also I want to kind of market that,
Yes. Okay. So what Phil's talking about is the ironscripter.us site. I'm behind that site, and every couple of weeks I post a challenge, and the challenges are really for all levels. So you'll find stuff for beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and those tend to be a little more scripting oriented. Write a function or write a script that solves this puzzle. Those have been going back most of last year. They're open-ended. There are no official answers. All I ask is that people submit a link in the comments to their work or solution. So you can go back to the ironscripter.us site and you can find all sorts of challenges that I encourage you to try and see how you can solve them. Again, the answer is not so much important because a lot of times the answer is kind of irrelevant and just kind of silly, but it's the techniques that you have to develop and the commands you have to learn that you're going to apply to other stuff that you will do that will matter. So that's the important part, and that's why I think this is so important. It's just that you have to use PowerShell every day. And I've encountered this all the time when I'm teaching or presenting. People say, yeah, I've learned PowerShell. I've gone through like the first, month of lunches books, but I don't know what to do with it. So this is something that you can do with it. You may not have an immediate need at work to use PowerShell, but use some of these little puzzles. That's why I wrote the PowerShell Practice Primer, which you can find up on LeapUp. It's 100 exercises for beginner PowerShell people. Same type of thing. Okay, how do I figure out this problem? And in the course of figuring out that problem, that's how you're going to learn and improve your PowerShell skills. So again, we're going to start out really simple. And we have a number of questions. We probably won't get through all of them. I also have a couple bonus homework assignments, which I will leave with everyone. At the end of the meeting, I will post all of the questions up on my blog so that you can have reference for anything that we don't get to. And then later at some point, I might post some of the answers to things that we may not get to. Cool. I'll give you a question. I'll give you some time, and then I will go through and show you my possible solutions. The answers that I come up with are by no means the only solution or the best solution or the right solution. You may have something that works better, and that's fine. But hopefully, I'll talk about some of the different things. A lot of times I'll have like 3 different ways I could do something. And I want to show you why I use them and how they work. And again, maybe you'll learn something through that little conversation.
Are there
I'm
any,
not expecting to look at anyone's code unless you want me to look at it.
are there any version requirements?
Okay,
for-
so version requirements, no. You should be able to do everything from a Windows PowerShell prompt. I recommend using the IC or VS Code, just so you can keep a record of what you're doing. But if you just have the PowerShell console, you should be fine. Again, we're not writing scripts. We're not writing any code. It's just commands that you would type out interactively at a console prompt.
All right.
So
I'm excited.
and I'm going to be using PowerShell IC just because it's easier to present in than VS Code. It's not as distracting. So I need to take control somehow here.
You just go present. The top of the window.
Do I have a way of
At the top.
share content?
looking
Here,
at
we try to.
There we go.
So hopefully,
A little bit bigger, and then we're good.
bigger. All right, let me adjust. I have screen things, team things showing up. All right, that's a 200%.
That's
That better?
It's good to me.
That's just still too small?
No, I think it looks good.
So again, the answers to the puzzles are not limited to one-line commands, although some might be. Most of them should be solved with a few lines of PowerShell code that you could run interactively at the prompt. We're not scripting, but you might find it easier to work in an editor like VS Code or the IC. All right, so the first question here is, and it's real simple. How many stop services are on your computer? And I think, what do you think, Phil? People need what, like 2 minutes to solve this at most?
Yeah, I think that's good. So maybe we can just talk about,
Can we set a timer here for
what
2
the
minutes?
objective-
Go. Your time starts now.
And let's also take it from the other angle as well. So what happens if you don't know how to do this, right? If you're not sure how to do it, I guess maybe at the end here, we'll give a suggestion, right?
Oh yeah, I'm going to go through and show people how to do it. So if you just want to watch and see the question and then see the answer, that's perfectly fine. I know some people like Justin have offered up a live share so that you can kind of work together. So you might want to take advantage of that or use the flu bits, which sounds like a Harry Potter thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch Flu Bits. And so if you want to watch just even the Flu Bits and try and put your answers into Flu Bits, we can certainly do that too. Or you can jump into my page and it says Phil there. You can just throw something in, but you can also just jump around and see what other people are doing. And I'll certainly put in my answer at that point too. So I think one of the lessons when I was thinking of trying to do this is that to try and apply this to other things too. So there are opportunities. So because effectively in this message, we're trying to get some data, but we're also trying to count. We're trying to do some other things. So you can use some of these lessons for other things. And I think that's what I really appreciated in some of the work that you've done there, Jeff, is, I've seen multiple parts of that lesson.
Yeah, because once you're working with PowerShell, it doesn't matter what the object is. It could be services, it could be a SharePoint site, it could be a SQL database, it could be something from Office 365, could be any number of things. The principles and techniques are all going to be the same. All right, so hopefully everyone came up with something that you can work with. So here are some answers that I came up with, and I'll go ahead and run them. First one is really simple. Just, get service, and then I'm going to pipe them to group object, and then group on the status property. So I can see that I've got 166 that are stopped. Now, in some ways, just looking at that is enough to give me the answer. And then the group here, if you're not familiar with the group object, these are all of the corresponding service objects that fall into that bucket, if you will, where the status is stopped. Now, if I just wanted the number, I could do something like this. I'm going to just, it's one of the reasons I like the IC here, it's a little bit nicer. So there are all the stop services, and I can pipe that then to measure object, and I can see 166. And here's a fancy way of, if I just want that number, that 166, that count, I can run all of this in a parenthetical expression. This is going to give me a kind of an in-memory variable of all the stop services, which will have a count property. I'm assuming now that everyone's running Windows PowerShell 5.1. This kind of feature was introduced, I think, in V3 or V4.
I think 3.
Yeah. So I'm assuming everyone's running something new. So there you can see 165. Oh, looks like something must have stopped. Or here's another way, and this is using the new where method. So this first part here, again, the parentheses tell PowerShell, just kind of like math, that order precedence, run this command, hold everything kind of in memory as a group of objects. And then I can have the where method. And in the method, I have my script block. You can, again, use $_ where the status equals stopped. And all of this then will give me a count. And I get 164. I've got stuff stopping all the time now.
So Jeff, I got a question about that. So
Yes.
I use methods all the time. I've never used the where method specifically. Other than preference or style, is there any difference between the where method and piping and using where object after a pipe like you did in the previous example?
Technically, and this is all relative, the where method performs better than where object. However, this where method can't really work until this command finishes. So it's kind of a toss-up. And performance, it could be, in this case, it's a matter of milliseconds. It's really irrelevant. But on really large collections, especially if you have already collected the objects, the where method could perform a bit better. This was introduced for primarily for DSC. So it does perform a little bit better.
So like everything else, it depends. And there's some
That's right.
blog articles about what the performance characteristics of one is versus the other. So I know I've read one of these. I'll see if I can find that for reference.
I also find it interesting on your where object, when you're piping to where object, you know, I was old schooler PowerShell, I guess. You have the curly brackets with $_.status, and it doesn't read as
So like
nice
this,
as what you have.
so like this line here could also be written. And I debated on how to do this. This is the one thing I hate that the PowerShell team did. So you could do that. And you can also do this. These three commands are all the same. The sucky thing is, for those of us who have to teach PowerShell, is I now have to teach you 3 ways to use where object.
So for me, I have moved towards line 18 because it's just easier to type. That's what I usually do when I do my where statements. However, I do a lot of Active Directory stuff, and a lot of times I'm doing some where search, and I want to search on 2 fields, and for whatever reason, I can never figure out the syntax for 2 fields with the where object like this, and then I default back to the curly brackets.
Right. The
Yeah.
only time you can use this syntax here that I have here on line 18 is for a simple comparison, for a single property that you want to compare. If you want to do a complex comparison, say on two properties, or with an and or an or something like that, then you have to use the, I guess let's call it legacy syntax.
Yeah, if you look at what I put in the chat there, you can see, if you look at the help on the where object, you'll see why. And it's because all of those are actually parameter sets. So you're not actually doing the expression, you're actually passing it 3 parameters, and then it fakes it like you were passing it an expression. But that's why you can't do complex ones without a script block.
Yeah, and so
For the more detailed
I always tell people, if you have to learn this, just use this way. Use the traditional way all the time. That way you don't have to try to remember can I use it like on line 18, or should I do it this way? Plus all of the help examples and all of the wealth of content online is using that syntax. So that's what I always tell people to use, because then you know that will always work. I hate this PS item. This was introduced because apparently $_ was too confusing to people. Anyway, okay, so let's move on. So, question number 2. List all the services on your computer that are set to auto start but are not running. Services that are set to auto start but are not running. This probably also is a 2-minute task. Do you think, Phil, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we do is just put a couple time and then kind of potentially talk about some of it, just the overarching, the idea behind it.
Yeah, your
And
time has
that's
started, by the way.
Yeah, that's it. We're just killing dead time. I don't want to put on the Jeopardy music.
Well, I've got a fun little countdown going on here. People can look at.
I know you do.
This is a countdown I use for my classes when I have a half hour before the class begins, or if I'm set up at a conference and I'm waiting for the conference to start, I can throw this up and let people know when we're going to start, and it's got something fun to look at. And so I got the main task up on top, and then a subtask, and this is all using right progress. That shows a random, setting up a SharePoint form. Don't ask. So again, I mean, and with things like services, there are probably a couple ways that you can do this. You will have to figure out what objects to work with, what properties to look at. There's no single command that will give you the answer.
So I think
there is, but you're going to have to know how to use it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where I was trying to get to, the idea that this is about chaining some of those fundamental knowledge into, okay, if I get this, then I can parse into this, I can connect it to that, and then that's where really the magic and the power of PowerShell is that you get these things that you can just build upon, and if you kind of work on those fundamental pieces, then you can just abstract it out to anything. And so yeah. The fact that you're looking for services, well, no, I'm just looking for files that have these date types, that are these extensions, and then all that. You can build all this other stuff, but the idea is that if you know the different parts, you can break down your really complex problem into a really manageable problem set.
And the whole point, and the other thing that I love about these exercises is it forces you, or it should force you, to go back and read help for commandlets, help and examples. Because you have to be in the habit of doing that all the time, even for stuff that you think you know. I am always amazed when I encounter even myself and say, how do I do that? And go, fine. I go back and I look at the help and go, oh, well, there's the answer right there. There's a parameter, or there's an example. So and especially now that the help is open source and it's updated, certainly in the PowerShell 7 world, you have to read the help all the time. Even for stuff that you think you know.
So
right,
Phil and I attempted these before this, and we compared our notes, and it was interesting that Phil and I usually had the same tact to sort of solve an issue, but our syntax looked different just because the way we normally type things in command prompt. So with the luxury of time, I went for the more prettier code, and Phil went for the more like just get it done code. So
And I think that says a lot about the two of you.
And let's see what Jeff did.
Yeah.
Is he elegant or is he get it done?
Yeah. Well, I tried to come up with a number of ways that I wanted to teach here. So using get service. So I can do get service. Now get service itself, from reading the help, has no way to filter, right? Other than like on the name. So here's an example, for Mike, where I need to do a complex comparison. I need to get all the services where the status is not equal to running and the start type is equal to automatic. Now, if you weren't sure about that, because single service doesn't do it, pipe it, and I know I'm cheating here using aliases GM forget member, and I can see here then that there's a start type here. I may not know what that means, so my technique is to get a representative sample of an object, pipe to select all or format list all, and now I can see, oh, start type, automatic. That's the kind of value that I'm looking for. Once I've made that discovery, then I can build my filtering, and then I'm just going to select the properties that I care about, the name, status, and start type. So on my machine, these are the services that are set to automatically start, but are not running currently. No, again, nothing fancy here. It's a one-line command. If I wanted to turn this into some sort of reusable tool, yeah, then I can wrap this in a function. But I would encourage people, don't write the function from the very beginning. Start with a command that works like this at command prompt.
Would you not want to distinguish between?
You'll never be able to write the function.
Would you not want to distinguish between automatic start and delayed automatic start, which is start up type?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, my question was just automatic. So that would be, if you need to take that into account, the delayed, that would be another approach that you would take. I was just going for a simple automatic for my problem.
So exactly that, similar to what Clem was just saying, is that where I solved it one way and Mike solved it a different way. I think in Mike's code, he says where the status is stopped. And I was like, well, as a person not running. And so, you put not equals, all the things, the question was, is it not equal to running as opposed to stopped? We assume that there are multiple statuses between stopped and running. It could be starting.
Right.
Could be,
you can have a service be paused.
Mm-hmm. So,
or suspended or pausing, or if you look at the enumeration for that service type, there are actually quite a few possibilities, which is why I use not equal to running.
And I think the point there is just that, it's all a matter of the question and what you're really looking for. And it's also the value that you can get a lot of data out of it, is that you can be as granular as you want to be, or you can be the reverse in something else, and not so much granular, but just give me whatever this is and I'll figure the rest of it out later.
Yeah, so as far as get service can tell, on my machine anyway, I only have services that have these start types. I don't have the delayed automatic, because I think get service treats that as an automatic setting. I believe, though, that get sim instance, this would be another approach, because now I can use the Win32 service, and here I can use the old-fashioned filter. Now remember, with WI sim, the operators are the old legacy operators, not the PowerShell operators. And the property names are different. It's not start type, it's start mode. Again, you can get a representative object, pipe to get member, to discover those things. So there are the same services and should be the same result. Now, just out of curiosity.
So the last thing I want to point out there, I feel like I'm talking a lot here, but
No, that's fine.
is
I want
that
to ask you.
wanted to point out is that if you look at my code, it's actually in 2 bits, or I'll put it in the chat, is one of the things that I did is I said get service, then I filtered on the automatic, and then I filtered again on the where object not equal to running, and then just gave you the count. And so I purposefully put it into two chains. Now that's not the most efficient way to do it, but
Yeah,
as
I would
Mike said,
put your where objects, if you can combine them, combine them.
well, but the point, because I wanted to use that part of code where I can only do a simple search, I can do a simple search. I just pinned another one on the back of it. Now, granted, it's gonna do some extra piping through the pipeline, but at this point, like, I don't really care because of the work I'm doing. If I'm going to do it at scale, well, no, that's not something I want to do. I probably want to put it into that custom, curly brace and do some real fine filter left kind of thing. But sometimes it's just as good to throw it in and just use a bunch of where objects right on top of each other.
And a good example of that, Phil, is what I just posted in the chat with the pictures, especially with the new custom style pipelines. I mean, see how I chained those where objects together,
Yeah.
like, especially for somebody, if you want to make maintainable code, like that is really easy for somebody to read and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I think with the you just need to know, like, understand too, is that will pipe everything to the next one and the next one. And so if you're doing, it's very easily readable and maintainable, but then also it's not if you're going to, try and optimize that code for the fastest it can possibly be, well, that's a different workflow.
So let me just ask, where is that the custom style pipeline supported? Because I've seen Justin do that twice, and I am not sure where that works.
That's 7 and up only. I mean, I might work in some versions of 6, but basically think of it as 7 and up only. You can always just add backticks too if you want it to still look like that and be 5.1 compatible. Just add a backtick after every line.
So 7. Okay, I haven't attempted that. I love that. I think that's so much more readable.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, I have some of my code that looks similar to that, except the pipe is on the end of the 9. So it's
Yeah, you can do the
half-
pipe on the end too. Like that's typically what I do because I hate backticks. But I mean, like if you wanted to have that nice look, you can add the backticks. But yeah, I typically, if I'm writing 5.1 compatible code, I put the pipe at the end.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
you're talking about like this line here, how I have the pipe.
yeah. And then what I
Well,
typically do
do on
is
each
I
line.
pipe,
Yeah, sure.
and then I tab the select object.
So line 32, you tab in just to sort of give it a little visual bump.
Yeah, and you can configure VS Code to actually do that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Justin. I abhor the backtick. If I see someone using a backtick, I can tell that they're still learning PowerShell and they haven't fully grokked it yet. PowerShell, especially in an editor or even in the console, it understands if you put in a return after a pipe, an open parentheses, an open curly brace, it knows that there's more to your command, or a comma. That's the other one. So, I mean, I could have done that. And
I just
because
put in the
my
chat like
code is so
the
big,
5.1 per.
Yeah, there you go. That's mine looks.
so there's nothing wrong with that. My problem sometimes is that I'm writing code that has to show up in a printed page in a book. And so I have to watch line lengths.
Mhm.
So sometimes I have no choice but to use a backtick just because that's the only way I can get the code to format in the printed page. But that only applies to me. That should not apply to you. Just hit enter after the pipe. Now, some people like to write code like that. So they'll do a pipe, they'll do the command pipe, and then the next line. So every command ends in a piped expression. This is where stuff like splatting comes into play. Now, and I don't know if I have any examples of this later, but I hate to have a commandlet that has 20 parameters or 10 parameters, like any of the Active Directory commandlets, that then scroll all the way across the screen. I'm going to splat that with a hash table. So when I read my code, I'm just reading all vertically, and I don't have to worry about trying to scroll over to read all of the code.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about now, it's kind of style things if you're writing code, which is good, but let's move on unless there are other questions on this exercise.
All right, there you go.
All right, so number 3. There's a Win32 BIOS class. You use with WMI and SIM. Get a list of only the property names of that class. How much time, Phil, do you want for this?
I think we were talking a lot about them. I think if we go back to the front page and then just leave it out there, and then we'll just give it a minute or two, and then just if somebody wants to skip on to the next question and while we're waiting, and then can you jump back to the other screen and look at the questions? Because we're gonna get to those. I just want to, if you got that, number 3, then you can certainly advance on to the number 4. And that way you can start your work on it, and we don't have to give people that much time. I think we certainly want to give people some time, but we've been talking enough about them. I'd like to try and get through as many as we can today. So, and I don't know. Is everybody ready? I think we'll go.
I'm already going. I'm containing my existential buffer.
So we're talking about challenge 3, correct?
Challenge 3. List
So
only the property names of the Win32 BIOS class.
so I have this working with SIM commandlets, and I got hung up on the WMI v5 versions.
That doesn't matter, whatever.
I'm just saying this is one of those ones where there's definitely 2 ways to do this. Older WMI commandlets, newer SIM commandlets.
Yep. And you'll get to it for now. All right, we're ready.
So does anybody have questions? Does anybody need any clarification on anything or something they're unsure of?
I said WMI, but you could use, I'm assuming at this point, everyone should be using the SIM commandlets. The WMI commandlets should be considered deprecated. If you need to talk to a down level server, you can still use the SIM commandlets and just create a SIM session with the DCOM protocol. But at this point, there's no reason for you to be learning or using get WMI object. Is there?
Unless you're dealing with some really old machines.
And for whatever
But
reason,
again,
the script has to
you
run
can still
locally
talk
on
to
the
them
machine
over
versus like
DCOM.
promoting.
You can still talk to them over DCOM. You create
but
a
like
SIM session using DCOM, same commandlets, same classes. It's all the same.
And that is ideal, but you might have a situation where like you need to get Win32 BIOS, like I think, on the server, like it's in a login script or something like that, and then it has to be down.
And now
That's
you're
the one kind of
always
exception.
going to find those little weird edge cases. But for the
For
most
the most
part,
part.
when I'm teaching PowerShell, I tell people, this is what you're using now. We're using the SIM commandlets. So because
Okay.
the SIM commandlets give us get SIM class, right? So now we have a really easy way. So if I just run get SIM class Win32 underscore BIOS, you can see that there's a SIM class property that I get back. I can expand that property because it's a nested object. So the expand property parameter in select object is a way to take a single property that is a nested object and expand it. And then I can take that result that you see there and say, oh, I just want to see that name property. And I bump my volume, my size to like 200. So now Just do this whole line. So now there are the name properties, or I'm sorry, the property names of the Win32 BIOS class. There's one way to do that. And you may run into this all the time where you have a property of an object that is a nested object. And so expanding that is a useful technique. In this case, I then need, if I just want that name property, to then add another one. And if I wanted, if I do that, because that result before my last select object, I was getting an object with one property called name. But if I just wanted the list, say to dump to a text file, then I can expand it again. And now I just have a text list of the properties.
Mhm.
So understanding how PowerShell works with objects in the pipeline and how you can expand it and totally get that everything in PowerShell is an object, this will go a long way in improving your PowerShell skills. Because for a lot of people who are new to PowerShell, this concept here kind of is hard to get their heads around because they're still thinking text. And they're just thinking, if I go back and take out this, I'll save this for the notes. So they see this and they just think it's a text list. They're not realizing that it's an object with one property called name. If you're ever in doubt, you can always pipe to get member, right?
Mhm.
So you can see, oh, yep, this is a object type and has a single note property of name. The other way that I did it, using the object notation, is because I know that sim class properties is the child name. Let's do it this way. So I can get my parenthetical expression, then get the sim class properties. I'll just do this a little bit at a time here so you can see. Then get the name property. And so just to be really fancy, let's go ahead and sort it. I didn't ask for that, but I just throw that in. So there we go. So being able to visualize, or at least to explain in words what PowerShell is doing, is how you can write a command like that. And we kind of repeat that. Get the class definition of the Win32 BIOS class. Select the sim class properties name. That object has a nested set of objects that have a name property, and then sort the result. Now, the other way that you can do this is you can do it actually from the instance of an object. So let's do $B. So $B is my instance of the BIOS class on my computer. And I've used this quite a bit recently. PowerShell abstracts or hides a lot of the sausage making from you because PowerShell really, despite what a lot of things happening lately, is written and aimed at administrators. You don't have to be a developer to know how to use PowerShell. Certainly, the more developer skills you have, you can go further with it and maybe get through things faster, but you don't have to be a developer. So the PowerShell team hides a lot of the stuff behind it. It abstracts a lot. Every object has kind of a built-in behind-the-scenes thing called a PS object. Okay, let's just do this a little bit at a time here so you can see this. So the PS object, that's how it's described. You can see that there is a properties method. So all I'm doing is saying, hey, get the properties object or the properties property. So these are all object types. So you can see there's a name and a value. So let's select the name and the type name of the value. Cool, so now I can see that the properties of the BIOS class are captions a string, and BIOS version is a string, install label language is an int 16. This is admittedly a little more advanced way to do this. I wouldn't expect that. I expect most of you, especially if you're new to PowerShell, to do something with gets in class. Mike, Bill, how did you guys do on this? What was your take?
So
I
I
did-
did.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Phil, you can start.
Well, I did 51. I've been around a while, so I know PS objects and properties. So that's how I did it.
I did I did the sim class properties as a method of the parenthetical Win32 class, like you did on 47. And then I guess I got a little bit fancy. I piped it to select object name instead of doing dot name like you did.
Yeah, I mean, once you get the objects you want to work with, then there are any number of ways to enumerate them or list out what you need. It really depends upon what your end goal is, what you need to do with them, how you want to see them, how you want to format them.
Mm-hmm.
I did the get member.
Yep, get member would work too. That would.
Hey, Jeff, there was a question in chat about using expand property with more than one property. Can
Can't
you
do
talk
that.
about that
Expand
for a minute?
property only does one property. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not really paying close attention to the.
No, you don't need to. That's why we're asking questions.
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
Yeah.
So
For one, the font is so small and it's hard to read.
So one way around that, just to spitball that a little bit, because I come across that a lot too, is expand property. You're most likely doing a select object and you want to pull stuff out of something like that. You can use a calculated property, also known as expression, and then build different expressions for each property and display them with a name. That's kind of usually how I tackle that. I don't know who asked that question, so I also don't know the scope. Maybe what I said doesn't make sense, so I don't want to just blow that off if what I said isn't sort of understood. But
Yeah, I think if you aren't clear about any of those kind of things, certainly reach out to Mike, reach out to me in chat, or Chairman, a couple of other people who can certainly clarify that, and we'll certainly take that extra time with you. So we're happy to do that. Let's go to number 4.
All right, number 4. So, and this one's obviously going to vary in everyone's system. So come up with some PowerShell to list all of the loaded functions currently in your PowerShell session. And in that list, display the name of the function, the number of parameter sets that function has, and the total number of lines in that function. This will take you, at least some of you, a little more than a minute.
this took me a while. I pasted my solution up on Flubits. I could put it in the chat also. So I would like to talk about this one a little bit because when Phil and I compared our notes, I think I went very different than Phil did. We ended up at the same result, but so before we were just talking about calculated properties and expressions, and I find that the more that I write code, the more I want to use splatting to simplify my code so I can read it easier on the screen. So remember, my focus for the most part is working in Active Directory, and Active Directory has, holy crap, the ability to come up with endless lines of syntax to figure out what you want to filter for. So I find myself more and more writing expressions and then making like a final line and piping in expressions or splatted code. And that's what I did with this. And Phil was completely different than me.
Well, since you have to enumerate functions, the first place to start is going to be your function PS drive. For those of you who are wondering, where do I even begin?
Or you could simply go get command type function.
Well, yeah, get command might work too.
What about get module?
Well, you want all, this is, the question is to find the ones that are currently loaded in your PowerShell session, not all the ones on your computer, but the ones that are currently in your PowerShell session.
Get module will only show you what's loaded.
I'm just saying what the requirements are. If you want to use get module or get command, that's fine, because those can work too.
Yeah, I think not all functions are in modules, because if you do, it'll just tell you all the modules, not.
That's a good point. I have a lot of functions that are only loaded from my PowerShell profile script. They're not loaded in any modules. So if I use, get module, it's not going to show me the functions that are loaded in my PowerShell session. Get command probably would.
Well, yeah, I discovered a while ago that get command has the command type, and you can say function. I want just the functions. I think there's a couple other types that you can, of command types that are available to you in get command.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting. I found it once and I was cool and used it ever since.
Right, and that's, again, you learn that because you went back and read the help. Go, oh, get command has this ability that I can limit command types by function or commandlet or whatever. Yeah.
Or actually the reverse is that tab complete is your friend. So I go, get command dash, oh, look, there's a command type. And then they go, okay, then you function type that. And then you go, oh, what else is in here? Aliases, and I'll get this. And oh, look at that. So I am all about command, tab completion is your friend. And also with PS readline. Oh my God, PS readline.
Yeah, tab complete has been a friend for me more and more, especially when I'm trying to show teammates how to do stuff and I just want to quickly show things.
So again, we want to list all the loaded functions, displaying the name, the number of parameter sets that that function might have, and the total number of lines in the function.
Cool trick with the function provider, PS provider.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, and this is, again, none of these really are intended, other than maybe some of the really early ones, are intended to be one-line commands. This is not a one-line command challenge. So if it takes you 5 lines of code to come up with the result, then it takes you 5 lines, that's fine.
But I think one of the things too is I'm looking at some of the other people's comment or their code in Fluebits, and that's kind of where I like to jump in at this point, is that you see other people coming up with their solutions in different ways, and that's perfectly acceptable, and that's good. So if you want to just, go check out other people's code, it's certainly a good place to go look.
Hopefully we haven't scared off too many people.
No, and I think one of the things that I liked about this question too was that, at least when I envisioned this question, is that this is clearly something I need to process in working with that other stuff. Before it was just some of the other questions before were just about like parsing away, stripping out, or just finding the individual pieces you're looking for. Here, I kind of see this as give me some of this stuff and then tabulate the data on the fly, or not even on the fly, but just as I'm working with it. And so that was an interesting lesson for me to say, okay, how can I effectively process the data as I'm working with it? And
Yeah, 'cause
so,
you haven't seen any of my answers,
oh, I know.
right?
No, I haven't seen your stuff at all. I've only been giving what you've seen right here.
I just gave you the questions, yeah.
I like that even your choice of what to pull out, it's not completely intuitive. We had to work at it to get to it, or I had to do some discovery to go find it.
The total number of lines kind of threw it for a loop.
Yeah, because it's not a value. You gotta make it.
And that's the nice thing about PowerShell is that, and one of the reasons I think that I'm so drawn to it, it's like magic. Because I can say, get me this and display it this way, and I want to see this property, but oh, you know what? I also want to see this magic thing I'm going to make out of thin air with smoke and mirrors and eye of newt. And I can make up anything and have PowerShell do all sorts of things once I have mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my challenge when I'm teaching, is because I've been doing PowerShell for over 10 years. I dream and about, okay, how am I going to do this in PowerShell? I know, total nerd alert there. But like they say, like a foreign language when you start dreaming in it. Well, I know PowerShell.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just comes naturally to me, and I forget sometimes. I have to remember, okay, what was it like when I was first learning PowerShell? And how much of a struggle was it to get my head around it? So I always have to remember that. And if you're teaching PowerShell to people, you have to remember that. For a lot of people, it's like banging your head against a brick wall, because there are some real paradigm things and some conceptual things that if you can't get your head around, you're going to hate PowerShell. It's going to be the suckiest, crappiest thing you've ever worked with, until you have that aha moment and the light bulb goes off. And then you realize, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And why did it take me so long to learn PowerShell? I hear that all the time from people, all the time, for years. Say, oh, I wish I'd learned this sooner. And once I've learned, they go, oh, everything is possible.
One thing that I keep coming across with PowerShell and the user groups is we have a lot of people that attend meetings, and we end up naturally comparing ourselves like this, people putting code in the chat, comparing themselves to each other in the meeting, not realizing that almost everybody that attends these meetings are leaders on their team. Because you are showing the initiative to learn, you really should be maybe a better thing is to compare yourself against your coworkers, because everybody here is sort of the person that wants to learn more and is putting in the extra effort. And if you always compare yourself to this person or that person and they're excelling, you may never realize how far you've come yourself. I find it with my team all the time. I feel like I'm constantly pushing my team to try to do something a little bit more than work in the ISC and do a one-line thing and, make a function or do something like that. So it's about scope, right? Whenever I look at the people I'm working with here, everybody's awesome at PowerShell. But when I go back to work, everybody really needs to push past their limits that they hit, and they didn't want to go any farther.
Yeah, I think one of the things, instead of trying to compare yourself with someone else, because like you said, that can lead to imposter syndrome really quick, is to compare yourself with your previous self.
Totally.
Totally. Right. So yeah, I compare myself today with what I knew 6 months ago. And if you compare yourself against your previous self, like what have you learned? that's kind of it's better on the person's psyche.
I just wanted to reach out to Raymond. Raymond, if you want to talk about, you feel like you're on an island, no one on your team is on PowerShell, feel free to reach out to me and Phil or any of the other guys after this. We definitely have a lot we could say about that. I was in that same situation. You are not alone there. Don't give up on yourself.
And I appreciate that. It's hard whenever you can't put some code out there in front of somebody else, and the social aspect of it, it's kind of hard to sometimes. So anyway,
so I don't want to steal from the meeting, but I do want to just follow up on that one thing here. So very early on, when I started attending this user group, I met Phil and a bunch of the other guys here, and I would watch them put solutions on the screen, and I was like, man, this stuff is cool, but I don't understand. I don't get the opportunity to use this stuff at work like you guys are doing. And one of the guys said to me, I was in the exact same spot as you. Now you know what you're going to look for in your next job. We all hit the point where we outgrew the job. The team didn't want to come along on the ride. That's when I kind of knew maybe I need to look at a more challenging position with a team that's more willing to do the things that I'm looking to do.
All right. So
Get back to, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just trying to keep track of the time here for people. And
Yep. I think we're good.
all right. So there are a couple ways to do this. One is there is a very simple one-line command. I'll just run it first, and then I'll briefly explain it. So these are all the functions loaded in my PowerShell session. There's the name, number of parameter sets, and the total number of lines. Now, how did I do that? So in my case, I'm enumerating the function PS drive, which gives me the, and again, you could get a representative object to see this. So I know that the name is there. And here's an example where there is a nested property called parameter sets. And I am, get my mouse to work here. So I'm creating a custom property using a hash table here called parameter set count, and the expression is just the count property of that nested property parameter sets. And then the number of lines, there is a script block property, and all I'm doing is piping that to measure object. If you read the help for measure object, you'll see that there's a line parameter to say, hey, measure the number of lines in a text file. And then I'm just measuring that to get the total number of lines. And that gives me that result there. So that's a real simple one-line command to do that. So the takeaways, the reason where this might be useful to you for other things are, creating custom properties. Maybe you didn't know about measure object has the dash line parameter because you just used to measuring numbers. Now, the other way that I did this was, again, using getChildItem for the function PS drive, sorting on the source and name. Now, the source will be if it's in a module or whatnot. And then I'm going to create a formatted report grouped by the source. And then the properties will have those same custom properties that I just created. So this gives me a nicer report based upon the module that it comes from. So like the MyTickle, this is one of my modules. Here are the functions, number of parameter sets, and the total number of lines. And then any function that doesn't have a source, like these up here, are either defined in my profile, like copied to here, or PowerShell puts in like all the letter shortcuts for A, colon, to change your locations. Now, even though these two examples are one-line examples, sometimes it may make more sense if you were scripting this to be something more reusable, is to break it down into multiple lines. So in that case, I'll just get all of my functions. And this also becomes a nicer approach too if you're troubleshooting or don't fully understand everything that you're seeing. Now, again, I've been doing this for so long, I can probably, bang something like that out with minimal effort. I may have to tweak a few things I don't remember completely off the top of my head. For someone who's newer to PowerShell, I would not expect you, and don't feel bad if you say, oh, that's so hard, because it is hard to write a one-line expression like that, to understand and visualize what's happening in that pipeline. No problem. Take a step back. There's no one is saying that PowerShell has to be written in one-line pipeline. This is not a guy thing where look how big my pipeline is. We're not doing that, okay? It's what works for you. So sometimes multiple steps is better. So I get all my functions, and then I can use a for each statement. And in this case, I'm going to create a custom object and actually even give it a type name, because I know that that function object is what I'm going to get from my directory of my function PS drive. So instead of creating the custom object with the select object and these hash tables, like I did up here, I'm going to create a custom object for every function. And I'm going to take and create a new property called name and parameter set count and lines and source, and save those results to a variable. The results are still, the same thing that I saw before, but this code that I have here might be easier to read and build than the select object with all those hash tables. Because the other nice approach for what I've done here is $results. Type to get member now actually has a custom type name. So if I wanted to, I could build a format file or use update type data, and I now have a real object like a service object that I could work with in PowerShell.
And if you want more information, talk to a meeting 3 weeks ago, or no, 3 meetings ago. I think, who did it? Goldman did it? I think he did. Custom objects. We have a meeting.
Yeah, so now I can take my results, because they're a custom object, I can work with them however I want. I can sort, I can select, I can do filtering. I can say, you know what, I want to filter out all of those A to Z directory changing functions that PowerShell puts in, because those are really kind of irrelevant to me. Filter those out, and now I have a formatted table. Again, my next step would be to create a format PS1 file for my new function type or object type. And then I could build a function to encapsulate basically all of this, write a result of the pipeline, it's formatted, beautiful. That's kind of the approach that I take when I'm building PowerShell tools. Start with something at the console and then add layers to it. Don't try to write the entire thing all at once, because you'll just end up banging your head or killing your liver. So just do, one step at a time. Questions on that? Phil, Mike, or anyone else on how you approach it, or my solution to what you guys might have come up with, or?
One thing interesting I noticed is when you do the get child item on the function drive, you get the more function. Well, I guess it's not actually a function. It says the command type is filter. So if you do $sign functions, you'll see that. So everything's a function except for more, which is a filter. And so I actually had to where command type is function, so I could get rid of that.
Yeah, I could filter that I could filter that out. If I knew that, I could do directory functions. What's this property here called? Command type.
That's a good catch.
Yeah, so I could do something like that just to filter that out. I hadn't even noticed that the more was in there. I'll actually add that here to my.
Interesting. That's weird too, because mine says it's a function.
Now, Jeff, I have one quick question.
Is that a version thing?
Yeah, it could be a version thing. Yeah, I mean, because I'm in Windows PowerShell here. Maybe in PowerShell 7 it changed, but
I'm in 5.1. Somebody had a question? There was a
yeah, question.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Just in the PS custom object on line 75, where you have function script block defined in the parens, the measure object. Maybe you can dive in a little bit to explain to some of the newer folks how we're actually able to pull the lines.
So, so let's do this. Let's do get item function.
I went a different way. I started digging through the AST object, which was a little bit more complicated. But
yeah, that I tried that too at one point. Go, yeah, that's
it's a rabbit hole.
Not going to work. So
I just
parsed. And this is a good question because this is kind of the way that you want to approach PowerShell, especially when you're working with objects or maybe something that you're not used to. So get a sample object. So I have a sample object $F. That's just aliases. I don't want to type. So, and I have a definition, and there is the script block. If you look for help measure object, you'll see that there is a line parameter. Indicates, counts the number of lines in the input objects. So if I take $F.script block, if I just type in a measure object by itself, it just says, oh yeah, there's only one thing. There's no properties to this because it's just a script block. It's just a bunch of text. So there I can see that there are 74 lines. If I wanted to, there's also words, so there are 187 words. So my shortcut approach, that's how I can get just the value for that. Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, because it's funny. A lot of people, I never use measure object, and so I tend to forget that there's parameters. Very useful, and I thought that would be a great explanation for some of the newer PowerShell guys to kind of see how if you have to evaluate a sentence or paragraph or lines of code, this is a very, very easy way to do it.
Yeah, and I have to say to
I
that
actually
point,
had a challenge because I blogged a couple days ago that I was presenting tonight, and I included a little challenge about having people find the most used word in an about help topic. And the answer, which I kind of posted on my blog, kind of uses the same approach.
I love these because they really make you think, because you can come up with 4 or 5 different ways to do it. I went down the AST hole because I was working on some AST code yesterday. That's the first thing that popped in my head, but someone else, totally different route.
yeah, and so I went the route of just splitting on the return character. I took the block of text and the caret n, the new line character, and I split on that and just counted those.
You can do that too, yeah.
Oh, it's like that was, yeah. I'm holding it to it, but I'm like,
That's not me.
Yeah.
no.
Phil, when you do that, add one because the split will only give you the n minus one delimiters.
Yes.
All right, so we move on to another one, or
Number 5. I think we'll do one more.
okay, we're number 5. And the rest of these, I will post the questions on my blog. And I want to talk about the homework too. So we'll do number 5. All right, create a formatted report of processes on your computer grouped by the username, and skip processes that have no username. This actually shouldn't take you too long. This should only take you a couple minutes. So a formatted report of processes grouped by the username. And you can decide what you want to display. You can display everything or a subset of properties. That's up to you.
I think
But
people
we
get an
want it
error
nicely
here.
formatted and grouped by the username.
If you don't launch as an admin user, I think you'll get an error doing this, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. This.
You, in order to get the username of a process you don't own, you have to be an admin.
Yeah.
So you can't see the owners of another process. You can see them.
I run as admin all the time, so I don't, and it's just me, so I don't think about those things.
Yeah.
But you're also, I'm assuming you're doing this on your own computer, so you have rights to do that. If you don't, well, it sucks to be you.
I don't trust myself on my own computer.
Yeah, that's where you set a PS default parameter on what if to be true for all your commands. Then you have a read-only PowerShell session.
I would be doing this. I would be doing that. I would be doing that. I think I can. I think I can. So while we're reading here, people are doing some of the other work. I want to potentially even go back and take an opportunity. You know, I'll probably put it in the chat as if people want to jump ahead or even get to the other questions. Because I don't think we're going to have time to get to the other questions for later. So I'll put it in chat for now to get to what the other questions are going to be. And that way, because yeah, I think we're going to run out of time.
There's another timer here.
And what's super fun though is that, you know, yeah, some of these were pretty not straightforward, but you know, you could do some of these, but the idea that, you know, you could really come up with some interesting challenges. And I appreciate, you know, Jeff coming on and actually, you know, talking about these challenges. It was super interesting.
Yeah, I think I may have to write another edition of the PowerShell practice primer that has much more advanced problems. So that's on my list for the spring.
Along those lines, Joel Salo's got that great module, PS Cohen's.
Oh yeah.
I think he's got 500 or 600 questions in there, if I remember correctly.
I will tell you, it is amazing. I'm doing it now. I've been doing it probably for 3 weeks, and I'm just getting to the 500s, but it will really, really embed it in your head, some of the tough things.
It is Pester 4 based, but it is pretty eye-opening to learn new things that way.
And Doug Fink has his, I think it was called Tiny Projects, which are little PowerShell techniques where they're even more sillier than mine. But they get you using the PowerShell code.
He's got
I
them
think
where?
Doug Fink, I think up in his GitHub
So
repo.
tiny projects.
Tiny projects, I think is what it's called.
We're gonna have Doug here in the future. We've been going back and forth, and I gotta follow up with him.
See if I can find a link to it.
The iron scripture is good too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and of course, I encourage everyone to go back to the Iron Scripture, that US site. There are the whole year's worth of challenges, again, all sorts of levels. And even stuff that's simple, even if you think, oh, that's beneath me, I would still encourage you to try it, because you might pick up something new.
Or just dust off cobwebs on stuff you haven't touched in a while.
Yeah.
So Jared asked, I think he wants to know what module we were talking about, and I think it's the same thing that Dan H asked, which was the link above Dan H in the above Josh King in the chat, which is PS Cohen's. It's a learning module. You install the module, you run through a series of questions, and you basically earn points and move up levels. And when you can't, I think, if I remember correctly, because I haven't done it in a while, Joel has a response for all the answers to sort of explain what's going on there.
Yeah. Yep. You will learn Pester. It is a great tool. If you haven't used it, definitely get into it, because he breaks it down almost like dummies for PowerShell.
We had Joel talk about that. I think it's 2 summers ago now. It's on our YouTube channel. It's a long video, but Joel's brilliant. He demoed the PS Cones module for us. So if you're interested, the link in there will take you to the GitHub repo, or you can go to our YouTube channel and see the demo that he did for us.
Yeah, if you're not really familiar with, even just reading the man pages and trying to figure out and go from there, you can actually just watch it and oh, okay, this is how he's doing it. Kind of like lead by example. That's really a good opportunity, because I went back and did that and I was like, oh, let me try and remember, and I just watched him do it. I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. I understand what I'm trying to do. So it was really helpful.
Question, Jeff.
Yeah.
Is username something in PowerShell 5, or do I have to go to a higher version?
No, you should have it in Windows PowerShell. I think it's been introduced for a number of versions. My screen is still shared, right?
I'm not sure how far down it goes. So if you actually look in Bluebit
4.10. I just ran into that issue yesterday. It's 4.10.1.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing username.
It's a parameter called include username.
Oh.
Yeah, see, that's the first thing. You have to read help on Get Process to figure out, how do I do this?
Or you can look at my code, and I say, screw it all. I use called WMI. I get the processes, and then there's a function. There's a method on the process that says get me the owner, and that's how I do it. That's how I used to do it back in version 2, and then I use that code from there, or at least that's how I remember to do it. And once they did it in 5, I'm like, I don't, I guess I just don't remember. So I just use get owner.
Well, let me go through my examples. I think we've given people enough time. My screen is still being shared, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're still good. Yeah,
I don't see the banner on my monitor, so I was confused there for a moment. All right, so using Get Process. Again, if you read help, you know that there is an include username. So I can see the username for all of them. Although, as you can see, some of these have no username, and that's what I wanted to filter out. So I'm going to filter those out. All I want is where username. Now my filter here, let me point out something here. I could have used a regular expression. I don't have to really use any sort of comparison operator. If the username property exists, it is implicitly true. And the whole point of a where object is that expression script block has to be true or false. So if there's a username, it's true. I don't have to compare or do anything else. One of my biggest pet peeves in PowerShell is, let's say that this was a Boolean property. If I see that in people's code, I know that they are not, they're still learning PowerShell. They're still thinking text. They're trying to compare the string foo to true. If foo is a Boolean property, it's true or false. So where object, it's true. I don't have to do a comparison. Yes, there are maybe some edge cases or just for clarity where you want to be totally explicit, but you don't. I don't think you need to do that. So in this case, where username. So as long as that property is there, that is implicitly true. Sorry.
Now, Jeff, if that property is there but it's blank, will that return it then?
Well, let's find out. So let me just do that much.
Because I know that's one thing that I run into AD a lot is the property's not there or the property is there but it's blank.
Well, yeah, so that's where you have to look, you got to kind of know your data. If for some reason the property was really just a space, then that's something different. In this particular case, if there's no username property defined, then it's not defined at all, it's basically null.
Yeah.
So my syntax would work. If it could have been a blank line or a series of a tab or something else, that's a different story.
And in that case, you would want where object to be null on the left.
Then I
on your
would have to
comparison.
do something else. But in this case, I know what the object is going to be or that property is going to be, and this should work. So I can then sort on the username, and I'm doing a secondary sort on the name of the process, and then piping to format object, format table, grouping on the username. So it's very important when you do the format table and the group by, which I use often, is you need to make sure that you sort on that property before you pipe it to format table. If you don't, format table will get the first batch of objects from the pipeline and format them, and then we'll get the next batch and format them. Because what you may not understand about PowerShell is that when you have a pipeline expression like this, each step of the process doesn't run completely before it goes on to the next one. So get process is doing its thing and it's getting process objects and it's in essence batching them, let's just say in groups of 10, and then pipes them to where object. Where object does this thing and then pipes them to sort object. Now here is one case though, sort object won't send anything onto the pipeline until it knows it's received everything that's coming into it. Because otherwise you'd have an incomplete sort, right? Once everything is sorted, then that can go to format table. If you left out that sort object and just pipe the where object to format table, get process is going to go through and say, okay, here's 10 objects and group them on the username. Okay, here's another 10, group these on the username. Well, if you're repeating the username, you're now getting a new group. So that's why you always want to sort before you pipe it to format table if you're grouping. Make sense?
Good tip. I didn't think about that, but good tip.
So it's a question? Someone's breaking up. All right, so let's look at the sim approach, which is what Phil was talking about. And just to speed this up, because my first approach is not very fast. There is a method on the sim object called getOwner. And so I'm going to get the first 10 processes and pipe them to add member, where I'm going to create a new property with the result of the getOwner method by using the invokeSim method. When you use add member, I want to pass it through. Here's my where object. I need to make sure that I get a value for that. I probably could have added a filter for getSim instance, but I didn't, so we're just going to leave it at that. Sort and filter. This is a little slower because you have overhead with getSim instance, and then invoking the sim method. That takes time, which is why I just did the first 10 processes.
Yeah.
But you can see that that works. This performs a little bit better, where, again, this first, what I just did is a one-line command. That's just showing off. This might perform a little bit better, is first get all the processes, and then for each process that I get, I'm going to invoke that method, create my new value, add it to the member. This is doing for all of them. This still runs a little bit faster, still not speedy. And you can see there that the invokeSim method is going to bring me back an object, and I am using a try catch to, if for some reason that fails, I'm not displaying an error, I'm just going to set that value to null. Otherwise, I'm building a value based upon the result that I get, because the result that comes back, there's one property for the domain or work group and another for the user. So that was all saved to modified. And then I can sort those results and then type those sorted results to format table. Now, whether you might use get process or getSim instance might, and if you were doing something like this, might depend upon, am I just doing this locally? Do I have to query a remote machine? Am I querying 100 remote machines? Maybe I want to use this with a background job. Is that remote machine, is it a Linux machine? If it's a Linux machine, I can't use getSim instance. I'd have to use get process, and in which case I'd have to use some sort of remoting protocol to do that. So I'm not saying that get process versus getSim instance is the best approach. It just, like your mom's going to say, it depends. Any questions on that, or what I did, or how I came up with those answers? If some of the commands are new to you, like maybe you've never seen invokeSim method, I encourage you to read the help and examples, or like add member. So I will leave, I'll post it on my blog, and then I'll tweet it out when it's posted. I'll post up all of the exercises. So I've got 3 more exercises for you to work on. I also have 2 bonus homework assignments. These are much longer projects. And again, I'll post these up on the blog, but I'll mention them here. You can decide if you want to tackle them or not. So the first one, write a PowerShell code. This is probably going to be a script file. So the homework is more advanced, probably will be something to the script. Your code should create a directory called C data files. Create 25 files of varying sizes, ideally between 1 KB and 1 megabyte, using whatever naming convention you want. But don't do something as simple as test 1, test 2, test 3, okay? The file should have a .dat extension. And then modify, after you created those files should have a creation and last write time of an age that's between 10 and 100 days ago. So in essence, you're going to create a directory with 25 sample data files of varying sizes and of varying ages. So that's your first homework assignment. Again, this is just kind of a learning exercise, so don't worry too much about error handling or parameters or making it too, script heavy. Once you attempt that, or if you think, oh, that's trivial, that's beneath me, I don't need to do that, give me something really worth my time, then I want you to create a formatted HTML report that shows every module location that's in your module path, the number of modules in each location, their total size, and then also show a listing of each module, which shows the current version or the most recent version and total size of all the module files. If you can make it a pretty file with CSS formatting, so much the better. Phil's probably already got that done. So I will post all of these things. Now, my question to Phil and Mike was, like on the homework stuff, I can hold off on posting solutions if you want to talk about these at a future meeting, or I can just wait a week and then post all my results online on my blog.
I say give us 2 weeks. So
Okay.
we'll talk about it at the next meeting, and probably that could be our networking or start from the beginning, and people can propose their potential solutions. We just talk about it. It might be that, and then we just talk about it then, and then so you can post it the Thursday after.
That's fine. I will post all the questions we did tonight, so other people, if they want to try them, they can. I'll include the homework, and I will wait to post the remaining solutions online for a couple weeks.
I think you could post the solutions to questions 1 through 8, but then the
No,
homework will.
I don't want to do that. I'm going to wait because I'm going to post this for people who want to work on them who didn't get a chance to come to the meeting.
Okay. I'm good with that.
You've all seen that, and if people need to see it, hopefully they'll encourage Mike to get the recording up. Then they can go back and scroll through and see the answers.
Yeah.
So I hope you found this interesting or useful, maybe learn a few new things, hopefully 1 or 2 new things.
Well, I think potentially also this is an opportunity for people, you can see questions 6, 7, and 8, right there. If you have any questions about, hey, theories on how to get there, you certainly don't need to talk about the code, but this is also a good opportunity to simply say, well, I think I would go about it this way, even if you don't get the code, because there are some ways to get around. So that's the thing, especially here is where Mike and I deviated as far as I went this direction and he went that direction as far as solving a lot of this stuff. And that's what's the fun about this, is that there's so many ways to do it, and you can certainly share with others. So that's my thought.
Probably a silly question, but could you post a URL for your blog?
Oh, no, yep, that's no problem. Here, let me
That's not a silly question.
if you just go to that or tag on the blog, the domain name will redirect to the blog.
So, JDIT Solutions. And Flubits will remain active. Actually, that has been used by the Slack and the Discord people. So you have to delete it, and that's a public link. So be considerate. That's not ours. So the RTP SUG stuff, I'll probably leave for a while. Eventually, I'll delete it but that's used by the PowerShell community overall. People in Slack and stuff.
I'm on Twitter as @JeffHicks, and this is the link to the PowerShell practice primer.
Mm-hmm.
Interested?
And then Iron Scripter.
Oh yeah, Iron Scripter.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or we just chat? I think
I was going to say, I made pester tests for all the different tests we did here today, just quick and dirty ones, to kind of like see an example of those for each of the challenges, if anyone's interested.
Yeah, I was looking at them. They're pretty good. You ran a tester test, or you wrote test 2? Ooh, you mods.
I wrote a test for every challenge.
It's on a different planet.
You're so.
And this Friday, to put out a plug here, 1 p.m. Actually, is our monthly PowerShell chat on Twitter. 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. Use the PS tweet chat tag to follow along. If you're sitting around in front of your computer and open-ended, casual, we just chat, share, code, and questions, whatever.
And so also, just a couple people asked before, but the meetings will be posted into our YouTube channel, RTP SUG. So look us up there. We do have a website. It needs some more love from me, but that will change in time. One of the other things is, don't forget our next meeting. Mike talked about at the beginning is we're definitely going to have. Oh my gosh, I can't forget her name. Jeremy. We're going to do CSS stuff and web stuff. So that should be exciting.